All right, guys, today on this episode, I'm with Jay, VP of Marketing at Ava Labs. So today will be a very insightful episode. So we'll be discussing across different topics from Web3 marketing strategies and different market conditions to future marketing trends to Avalanche marketing and branding strategy for this year. And we'll be discussing from different aspects from community building to KOL marketing to events and big partnerships. So on the event side, Jay will be sharing more insights on Avalanche Summit III, which will be hosted in Argentina. And that's where my background is to help set the vibe. That's the capital of Argentina, Buenos Aires.
Nice.
And
Perfect.
on a big partnership side, we've seen that Avalanche has announced many big partnerships. For example, like Stripe, Coachella, Maple Story Universe, Clearpool from diverse industries. So we'll be discussing how that all ties up and aligned with the broader marketing strategy of Avalanche. And make sure to watch until the end, guys, because Jay will be sharing some exclusive alpha leaks. So a lot in store. So now shifting the focus to you, Jay. Can you share more about yourself, your background, and your role at Ava Labs, please?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. So, on my background, I always describe my background to be really weird, but I think weird people do pretty well in crypto, it seems. And so I'm totally owning it. And kind of what's relevant for the marketing and crypto context is I started a music publication early 2010, 2011. This is when super passionate about music. You can kind of tell with my background as well, have always been a big music nerd, have grown up playing piano, trumpet, listening to all types of music, currently interested in electronic music mostly. But that's really where it all started. A few years after I founded this publication, I realized, hey, I think I have something. At its peak in 2012, we had about 1 to 2 million readers a year. So that was when I was like, wow, this side project I think is not a side project anymore. Maybe I should really figure out what's happening, how to replicate the success, what's actually triggering this growth. And a lot of the signs pointed to this enigmatic vertical called marketing, to me at least. It was very strange, but I also kind of stumbled into it. And then similarly, a year later, 2011, I came across Bitcoin. Came across Bitcoin, always open about this story, was just I was in high school, so people needed fake IDs and I bought fake IDs with it. So in the US, when you're 18, the drinking age is not until 21. So that was kind of like a past little fact, I guess. But in any case, I think it worked out pretty well. And that was really where I was attracted by its volatility first and foremost. And then subsequently, I think 4 or 5 years later, in like 2014, Ethereum started to talk about, or Vitalik started to talk about Ethereum and what he was planning, how it's more than just a trustless layer of value, but it can also be a layer that applications can be built upon. And so
Mm.
that was kind of like the origin story effectively. And really after that, you can start to see two interests converge. Worked at an agency called Ogilvy and Mather in 2015. This is when a lot of Fortune 500 brands were talking about blockchain. How do we settle some of the things we're doing on chain? How do we actually make things more efficient? Supply chain was also a big narrative as well, and so on and so forth. And so I kind of chased that tail a little bit and founded my own practice with a few co-founders within Ogilvy to really start consulting crypto and blockchain companies for go-to-market strategies. So that was like a year or two of my time there. And then after that, realized, hey, I want to actually be an operator. I love the roots that I kind of set forth prior during my music experience. And so joined a company called AirSwap, was hired as the head of marketing, led that team for a few years. We ended up getting acquired by ConsenSys, which was great. After the acquisition, had been talking to a few firms, one of them being Ava Labs. Ava Labs was talking about, hey, scalability is a huge issue, broadly speaking, but we have a lot of big solutions that are coming to the table, some novel ones as well. We feel like we have what it takes to service the world's demands on chain. And obviously a big risk. This was way before Avalanche was even launched. This was before the token sale as well. So nothing really was validated, but I was thinking to myself, if like a big memory of mine was when CryptoKitties launched on Ethereum. CryptoKitties launched on Ethereum, you couldn't do anything in Ethereum.
Mm.
And that to me was hugely problematic at the time. And also trying to explain to my parents like what I do and what the big news was. I was like, well, these digital cats have clogged this global payments network and don't get any volume or any trading because nothing ends up executing because these cats are taking up most of the bandwidth effectively. So in any case, that was more of like a funny way to describe it. And so the Ava Labs Avalanche punchline was very clear to me, and then was hired to lead marketing there. And
Hmm.
it's been 4 years since. Have touched a lot of different things. Have brought Ava Labs from zero to one. I would say we're kind of in this growth mode where we're trying to double down on our early hypotheses that we have across ecosystems and verticals. And so I feel like we're in a really nice mode where we're just cruising towards some of our goals that we've already been working towards for the last few years. So that's kind of like a big summary of my background, but also how we got to this point in the context of Ava Labs Avalanche.
Wow, very impressive. So clearly, here we have a marketing expert in-house today with us. So today, let's dive deeper into the Web3 marketing strategy for Ava Labs. How does Avalanche's marketing strategy changed from like bear market to bull market? And are there any shifts in like the focus or verticals that Avalanche is focusing on, for example, specific use cases? Can you dive more into that, please?
I think the strategy really hasn't changed all too much. I think we shift a little bit on being a little bit more aggressive if there's budgets for paid marketing, for example, or paid initiatives or activations that cost money in general. But I always like to keep things pretty lean. At the end of the day, all or most companies in Web3 still haven't really found true product market fit yet. And so we should treat ourselves as startups. I know we are all very well capitalized, or a lot of us are, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you can kind of like keep burning and playing the game that a lot of other tech startups might be playing, especially when they're not in crypto, right? They're finding market fit in consumer products or retail focused products. We're very, very niche still. We are creating products for, at least on the app side, maybe like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people across the world. And of course, there are millions, I think, around the world holding these coins, but not actually using the applications like maybe you or I would be doing. And so when it comes to the strategy at its core, it's always been what's our strongest value proposition on the Avalanche side. Avalanche's strongest value proposition has always been transaction finality.
Mhm.
Transaction finality meaning things on the chain settle very quickly. So the performance is really, really good. And so from there, we can kind of go around and say we have better transaction finality than any other competitor out there. And so therefore, if you're a developer, your applications are just going to perform. You're not going to have to worry about any degradation. You're going to have a really good user experience. So you can focus on your application and your ideas and let the chain effectively handle the infrastructure. And so that's like a little bit heady, I think. So, and a little bit niche in its positioning. And that was really like early stage positioning, I would say. But broadly speaking, you kind of like simplify it with, hey, this is high performance
Mhm.
um, without sacrificing anything else, I guess, on like cost, security, and the other tenants that I think people are aware of, at least in crypto. Now, I think where we're shifting a little bit more towards is we have a pretty robust application ecosystem. So the last few years, the whole idea was let's champion the applications. This is no different from the mobile boom. This is no different from the dot-com era. Maybe early days this was the case, but you would never hear Netflix, and this is always my favorite example, you would never hear Netflix saying, hey, this is Netflix powered by AWS or whatever they use, right? You never see that. And I think that's how it should be. And so therefore, Netflix is what people care about, not the infrastructure. Gunzilla, Shrapnel, Trader Joe, those are the things that people care about, not Avalanche. And I think right at this moment and looking into the future, it's really about doubling down on some of these verticals that we really are confident in, and then perhaps like shifting focus on areas that, hey, we tried validating these hypotheses or hypothesis, if we had a singular hypothesis on it, it didn't quite pan out as we had imagined because we've now been pushing it for a year or two. Let's see if we can not totally shift direction, but try to use some of the efforts that we've been putting forth the last few years and seeing if we can kind of pick up some scraps so then we don't have to start from
Mhm.
square one and from like an incremental position rather than a fresh one.
I see. That's quite a shift. So yes, from early stage, focusing on product market fit, focusing on key performance, transactional finality, and then now moving to championing the apps. So, and yeah, we've seen like now with like, for example, the AVEX DAO that partners with many key apps in Avalanche. So yeah, we do see more of that, especially with the AVEX DAO strategy as well. Right. So next question is more on um, the competition landscape. As we see like many emerging L1s and L2s launching, especially like in this bull market, what is Avalanche's strategy in like marketing and branding perspective to compete against other L1s and L2s and yeah, especially like to maintain the competitive edge?
Yeah, I think the main thing that has shifted the last few years is there's a lot of saturation in new participants in L1s and maybe more so L2s. Anecdotally, I feel like I see more of those. Um, and I think, like I mentioned before, on the value proposition and conviction of our product, Avalanche, I'm not saying it's a product-led strategy, but it can be because the product is so strong. And I think that's where in bull markets, it's not as clear. Everyone's saying I'm the strongest, and everyone's believing that what everyone's saying, and that's kind of what happens, right? And so we had a little bit of a challenge to differentiate ourselves there, but I'm sure everybody else did. Now, when the dust settles during bear markets, the products that have promised certain things might not actually fulfill those things. And I think that's where you're going to start to see degradation. You're going to start to see some of the launches that were TBDs that launch and then realize, hey, performance is actually not something that is up to par or up to the standards that they need. Also, as the industry grows, of course, demand grows as well. And so the pressures that didn't exist before now exist. And so part of the strategy, weirdly, has been, hey, let the market kind of speak for itself. And so a lot of the efforts of the BD team, a lot of the efforts of even the marketing team, but everybody else who's really external facing and talking to these partners are saying, hey, like X, Y, and Z protocol didn't work because we thought it was going to do this, but actually we need something like this. And I think part of it is also, I'm not trying to blame even the companies themselves, but a lot of these participants, especially those that are using blockchain products, are doing it for the first time. Imagine when you're buying your first computer or first phone, you make mistakes. You say, hey, like I read the brochure, I thought this is what I needed, but I realized this is actually not what I needed, and I needed something completely different, right? Like I was younger, I had a BlackBerry. I don't have that now. I have an iPhone, right? And so I think there's also a lot of maturity that's happening.
Mm.
And so kind of one part of it is natural course of a really strong product and kind of the industry evolving, but then also continuing to maximize what is actually the value that this product brings. And I think we want to really focus on non-utilitarian value propositions, meaning nothing too technical, right? Like even the transaction finality can only take us so far. At the end of the day, like that's not going to win over the mass market. They don't really know what that means. They don't really care what that means. And so I think right now we're doing a little bit of soul searching on what makes sense per vertical. So if you pick art or NFTs, and we've been focusing on art a lot, what works there, I think, at least as I've observed it for the last few years, is the sense of, hey, we are supporting the artists, but we are actually not supporting the artists and making them do what we want. We're actually championing leaders in the space that we've identified who then can bring up other artists who follow them. And so we're basically just funding their efforts while the strategy is really created and perhaps even co-created with us, but also just initiated by like leaders like Dave Krugman's a photographer that we've been working with for the last few years. His company, All Ships, has been incredible. There's also a bunch of other artists that we've been working with similar to Dave as well. And so that's like one part of the vertical, right? And then there's on the flip side, enterprises. I think one area, just to kind of switch it up, that we've seen is customization on chain. How do you actually configure things? How do you actually make things permissioned?
Mm.
How can you actually launch things quickly with Ava Cloud on the Ava Labs side, which is a managed block service that we have on the Ava Labs side? And our kind of broad view is these enterprises want to bring their solutions on chain, but they don't necessarily have the bandwidth or even maybe the capability to build out these really high performance teams to optimize for those end results. And so therefore they want to offload all of that to someone else,
Mhm.
offload the risk. And that's where Ava Cloud kind of comes in. Avalanche is, of course, the blockchain that powers Ava Cloud's deployments. And so we have these kind of like hedged positions, I guess, all across each vertical, but they're basically just unique go-to-markets. And so I think we're trying to find and solidify each one as you see each vertical, like DeFi, gaming, so forth.
Yeah, actually, like, I've seen many like interesting use case of subnets across like all of these verticals that Avalanche announced, like with arts, entertainment, gaming, DeFi. So, yeah, like we can see that Avalanche efforts to expand across all verticals, especially with customizable subnets, are becoming
Yeah.
like there's a lot of good examples out there. And that's where my next question is on the big partnerships that I mentioned earlier with like Stripe, Coachella, Maple Story Universe, and Clearpool. And I think today the Terms Finance as well with DeFi. So like, can you share a bit more about like some of these like big partnerships, the most exciting and what it means for the Avalanche ecosystem?
In regards to the really big brand names like Coachella, Stripe, Maple Story Universe as well, what's really crazy about these deals is they don't obviously maybe happen overnight. And I don't know, maybe that's not as obvious, but these things we've been working on for years. And so Maple Story, I've remembered it came into our Slack, our internal channels years ago, and we're trying to figure out what makes most sense. So, like I said with the enterprise point before, a lot of it's education. Here's what you can do, here's what you can't do. Enterprise is like, I have these dreams. Can I fulfill them? Yes, yes, maybe no, right? And there are a lot of questions and there's a lot of testing. And these guys can't just take as big of risk as perhaps early stage startups. They have a brand reputation, they have a huge audience. They also are aware that nascent technologies like blockchain have certain stigmas surrounding them. And so they have to be very, very careful with how they approach these things. They can't just launch a collection and then walk away from it, for example. I mean, people have, of course, and they've seen even the backlash from that, and it doesn't really work that well. And so specifically to like one example that you mentioned, Maple Story Universe, it's this game that's trying to reinvent itself, but it's a game that has a really large cult following. I
Mm.
know I played it a long time ago when I was a kid, at least the original Maple Story. Yeah, like I think we all have, right?
Me too, yeah.
And I think it's just like an internet kid thing.
Mhm.
But I think the way I see their go to market is they might want to keep themselves uh, relevant in the market. How do
Mm.
they actually stay ahead of the curve? And Maple Story comes from Nexon, which is a South Korean company. And so when you start to follow the chain of commands, you realize a lot of these enterprises that are deploying on chain, not just on Avalanche, but just generally, are mostly East Asian cities or countries. And the reason why is because they culturally, I think, are much more keen on just like going fully ahead in new technologies. They don't want to get left behind. They're just coming into their growth spurt, especially with in regards to South Korea and even China. Not so much Japan as much, but I think similar countries are around them are in similar states as well. And so I think you're seeing a lot more of appetite because of those reasons. And at the end of the day, the reason why Avalanche is really the go-to choice is because of customization, like I said before. They're able to configure their needs. Like for games, the common example that's used is gas tokens. Like they don't necessarily, or transaction fees. They don't want to charge transaction fees for every turn or every action that is made on game or on chain. But they also still want to use the chain to settle in-game actions, for example, or in-game transactions, maybe, right? And I think that's a really big plus. And I think the biggest thing that we've been waiting for is interoperability through what we call teleporter.
Mhm.
And interoperability amongst subnets or amongst Avalanche blockchains. Because just to kind of recap for anyone listening, it's Avalanche is a blockchain network. We have a bunch of different blockchains that are unique to the specs of those apps or solutions. And the last few years, they've kind of been siloed. You can connect through third-party bridges, but they're obviously very hard to use, and some people might not even know what they are. And so the best solution is to upgrade the protocol to be able to interoperate by default. So if you're going from one game to another, you don't have to configure a million and one things to get to that point. You just go, hey, I just want to send and receive, and that's it.
I see, I see. It does make sense because, like you give them customization and yeah, it's very impressive that many of these like teams, they have like really big community, right? Like MapleStory, Coachella have a lot of like loyal like festival goers that would just go every year and you manage to get them on board to the Avalanche ecosystem. So that's like really impressive. And it's also like Stripe as well. So that's like big partnership in terms of like enterprise. So can you share like what are some of the upcoming partnerships that the audience should keep an eye out for?
I think I wouldn't forget about what's already been publicized because oftentimes what's publicized, they might launch, but they might not actually start to put effort into that, I guess, launched version for a few months. There's always kind of a lag in crypto, it seems. It's like deployment, great, we did it. Like, let's hold our breaths, let's make sure everything works, but let's not necessarily open the floodgates yet. So typically we find like a beta stage launch and really haven't caught on. Or the other side could be, hey, we tested this out, but the market reacted one way and they didn't necessarily try the application, for example, or try the solution. And so they have to kind of go back and figure out how they can funnel more users in to try and see if they can get usage to keep validating their direction. So even like Coachella is a good example. That kind of shows that Coachella is highly interested in Avalanche. There's probably a lot more opportunities to come from that. Obviously, Coachella this year in 2024 is over, but Coachella is a massive brand. The parent company has a bunch of other festivals as well. And so I think that's a really interesting segment to watch. And similarly with like Stripe, kind of same suggestion on not necessarily forgetting about these things is Stripe is also a layer that no one should really care about. It's the thing that like connects all the payment rails together, right? And so it can enable a lot of new things. And so applications like Shopify is also similar to applications so you can have a huge ceiling of potential when it comes to demand, but it requires people to dip their toes in the water. You need merchants on Shopify to try the plugin to sell collectibles, for example, or use crypto as payment. Stripe also needs to be, I guess, like integrated or approved by the merchants who's using them to be able to actually leverage that at the end in the end game, right? And so I tend to find that for any company right now that's building in our space, launching or announcing something is usually more like proof of concept beta, like I said before. And then following that, when you have second or third time around of like, hey, this is actually what we're doubling down on, then that's when I think it gets a little bit more interesting and you're going to start to see a little bit more usage. Looking forward, I think some verticals that interest me a lot are NFTs still, especially with utility driven NFTs. Like NFTs actually used for certain things that might be boring for most, but I think is fascinating because it's non-fungible in nature. And so you can do a lot of interesting things like I think one use case that people use all the time is tokenizing deeds for your home or your real estate. And I think we're a little bit far from that, but things like that can start to pick up. Institutions, I think, have always been hot on Avalanche. I think transaction finality as a value proposition makes most sense to traditional finance folks because they deal with T+2, T+3 settlement, a bunch of old archaic systems that I think everyone's pretty over with. And so they're trying to look for new solutions, not just blockchain. And so I think, but in our case, they have been testing blockchain a lot and they've deployed a lot of capital on Avalanche as well. And so I think that's also going to pick up. And then I think to kind of round it out in threes, I think gaming is going to be the real, like, I don't know, wild card. I say it in a good way, though, because I think there are a lot of games that have announced to launch on Avalanche. I personally don't think that anyone's really figured out how to use the chain to actually provide value on their game. But I think some have found some early signs of that, which is really promising. I think the challenge is, and this is no dig to any of these games that are trying to go to market, especially in Web3, is when you're a game, you have to create a really fun game, but you also have to integrate the blockchain. Two really impossible tasks. Whereas any other vertical, like finance applications, well, just the settlement layers have always existed. And so you can kind of like mirror Web2 legacy systems to start. But gaming doesn't really have a system to emulate
Mhm.
or kind of use as inspiration. And so I think there's going to be a lot of experimentation to go. And then I think like Axie Infinity kind of did a little bit, they were definitely riding a little bit more on the hype. There's going
Mhm.
to be one game that's going to be very, very fun. So there's a virality aspect from the fun
Mhm.
nature of it and enjoyability just alone, and also is able to use the blockchain in a value added way. Like even if it's incrementally value added, it's okay.
Mhm.
And that game is going to just open the floodgates of like massive gaming funds coming in, deploying more capital, more startups coming in. And I think that's going to kick off the gaming cycle like it has done so with DeFi a bunch of times, NFTs a few times, depending on how you define these cycles, and gaming more or less once.
Mm. Yeah, that's all interesting, and especially like the institutional and gaming and NFT. Like with institutional side, that I just did another interview with Clearpool, and that's clearly like one of the RWA narrative and institutional narrative that brought these protocols to Avalanche. On the gaming side, we have like besides Maple Story, we have like Shrapnel and DeFi Kingdoms, right? So those two are like another other good examples. And NFT, there are actually like a lot of like NFT artists in the AVAX community that I came across. So yeah, I do agree with you in all aspects. So going next into like the community aspect, I want to touch upon that more since they're actually like really active AVAX Maxi that I came across. So like yeah, that's actually true. Like they're like Red Triangle all the way, Super Maxi, AVAX since like 2006 something. How did Avalanche bootstrap the community and manage to maintain this strong engagement from active members?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say if I had to kind of bucket a lot of the credit, I think the credit really goes to the long-standing Ava Labs leaders in the space, like the team leaders, the BD leads, like John Nahas, Luigi DeMeo. On the marketing side, as myself and Patrick Sutton for a really long time. Community has its own fair share of leads as well. There's a bunch and a bunch of like OGs, people that predate me as well. I've been at Ava Labs for 4 years, and so I think all of us, funny enough, when we look at each other, it's like the Spider-Man meme. We're all crypto nerds. We're all nerds. And so early days, I'd have like fond memories now, but maybe it was a little bit rocky in the beginning. But we'd spend all-nighters during the token sale. I think we all stayed up 2, 3 days in a row, trying to process KYC. We were the ones manually checking it. Like I was looking at thousands of IDs around the clock. And the reason why I think these stories are funny is because not everyone's willing to do that, right? You take a certain amount of person to do that. And so we have a lot of tenacity. We have a lot of grit, drive. And then I think encompassing this whole thing is passion. There's this debate online, especially on Twitter, about like marketers with passion or not to like learn and who actually makes the cut or not. Like I think you need to be passionate about this space. The space moves so quickly. It's not going to teach itself, I guess, or it's not going to change itself. You're going to have to teach yourself to figure out how to mold it and actually drive it into the future as opposed to being more of a passive bystander. And so from there, I think all of us have really built strong relationships with the community members. We built relationships with early people. There are some people that I remember from when I first joined, which is wild. We kind of were founded out of the COVID pandemic era. And so we were all virtual. So I think everyone was also seeking connectivity and saying, hey, let's talk. Let's actually like chat. And even still, like I think all of our DMs are open, right? And what does that mean? It's not necessarily like, hey, you can actually message us. It's more than that. It's, hey, you can message us and we'll actually talk to you because we'll be online at like 1 in the morning and just be like, hey, what's up? Like, what are your passions? What makes you tick? Like what do you love about Avalanche? What do you hate about it? And I think that feeling from these community members of being heard and actually being also more than heard, but feeling like they're a part of something bigger than all of us,
Mhm.
I think gets people to really stay. And then from there, it's just like keep validating their views on what this can be. Hopefully we're taking their feedback and not just shutting them out. And so really creating this ecosystem where everyone kind of lifts each other up. And I think also there's a leadership kind of function that starts to form from the early community members. And so you start to have these tiers of like badges of honor, I guess, that you wear. Hey, I've been aware of Avalanche since 2000, whatever it is, right? And oh, I'm just new. I've only been a part of this from like a year or two, but that's still a long time. And so I think that's what's really been happening. And then I think the red's pretty intense in your face because it's probably the only red logo. Actually, OP has red now too, but back in the day, it was like the only red logo. And so I think everyone was like, that's definitely AVAX. Everything else is like blue, black. It kind of blends in even if you have dark mode. So
Yeah, yeah, true. And like, yeah, I can see that like strong kind of like community and like maxi thing with the AVAX DAO community as well. I think that's like actually like a very well structured like ambassador DAO program that I came across, and very strong and active ambassadors in the program as well. So like I'm actually quite impressed with how strong the community is. Yeah, and many of the ambassadors have been like active in the Avalanche community since like way back. Yeah.
yeah. And I think the AVAX DAO or any of these like formalized functions, they're less fairly recent,
Mm.
but that doesn't mean that these communities didn't exist or these groups, right? Like I'm in like 3 or 4 smallish groups that are full of AVAX fans effectively or AVAX long individuals. And these groups are like 100, 200 people max. And so you can also see where the conversation is actually healthy and beneficial and personal, as opposed to like, I don't know, a Telegram with like 50,000 people. You can't have a sense of community there. It's just like too fast. The chat moves way too quickly, and especially during bull markets, it moves even faster. And so I think another question I actually have, which has been interesting, is like, how does crypto Web3 change up the community building model? Everyone goes to the defaults, Telegram, Discord. I personally don't think those are good enough anymore. Like
Mhm.
I don't check any of my Discord groups. I recently purged a lot of the Telegram groups I'm in because I'm like, I don't even check these. Why am I in these things?
Any.
Um, but I also want to be a part of it because I'm like, I remember early days, it was actually super useful because I could get alpha, ask the team direct questions. And so there must be something, and maybe it has to be built. And I think there's something out there. So whoever's listening, if there's like a startup idea, like feel free to take it. But uh I think that's what I've always been thinking about is how do we get from like adequate community growth to like really, really good community growth to then leveraging the unique components of governance on chain even. And I think those are some of the things that I think about. And I'm sure the DAO is also obviously like maybe a half step ahead with their structure, but I'm sure they're also figuring out ways to use some of the cool tech that we have in front of us to our advantage.
I see. Yeah, actually, like community leads to my next question as well, which is events. So I can see like the strong community when I attended Avalanche Summit II last year in Barcelona, which is one of the most impressive like crypto conference that I've been to so far. Like very well organized, great location, great venue, super hyped community. So like yeah, can you share a bit more about Avalanche Summit 3, which will be hosted in Argentina? Like, what can people expect from it? Why Argentina instead of Barcelona this year? And some hype ahead of the ahead of the event.
Yeah. Super about this topic. Co-founded Avalanche Summit with Jade Levinson. She's a good friend of mine. We've known each other for a long time now. We used to run events together. She has an incredible music events background. I do too. And so we were like, hey, we both have really good music events backgrounds. I think we can make something happen at Ava Labs. And then before we were at AirSwap too, we were doing the same thing.
Mm.
And at Ava Labs, it was almost the perfect storm. So I don't want to give ourselves too much credit, but it was like we were all really tired of going to the same conference rooms, going to the same hotels, going to the same like convention center floor, and you kind of just walk around like cattle and you just like look at all these sponsors and call it a day, right? And we were like, well, the music industry has had kind of its disruptive moment like 10 years ago, and it still is going through a lot of evolution, but it had really its catalyst, I think 10, 15 years ago, at least in the last like 20, 30 years. And that was really where music festivals started to erupt, especially around electronic music, but also just generally speaking. And so we were saying, hey, like let's not forget our past. Let's actually leverage that. And the first one was a lot of risks because we only had 3 months to plan it. It was 6-day event and it was for about 6,000 people. And we didn't have an agency or anything. We just did it ourselves. It was like nights and weekends type stuff. And we made it happen. There was a lot of hiccups, but no one noticed. Like one story I would have to tell, like if we had more time, was we actually didn't have ticketing systems until day of, and it was just because things didn't work the way they should have. We also had like flooring missing from the event because there was a strike that happened, like totally unexpected, and so the floors were held up like in Portugal or something. I forget where it was, but it was somewhere far. So looking ahead, right? That's kind of the background. We wanted to flip the event on its head and really create a great experience. What do people care about when go to crypto events? Most people, I think, wrongly assume learning. I think learning is definitely like one part of it, but programming, I think, is more so secondary now. What's really primary is meeting people.
Mm.
We met during one of the Avalanche events, I'm sure, I think back in the day, and it brought us together, right? And other people, I'm sure we have our respective journeys and we've brought each other closer to each other's circles. And then you exchange people and then you start to compound these circles and you're like, oh my God, everyone knows each other. Now we actually have a friend group or a professional cohort, which is really cool. And that's what we're optimizing for. And so when you think about music festivals, they have all these activations. They have yoga, they have like workshops. One thing that we did in Istanbul recently is we had a lamp making workshop and we had like other kind of like culturally relevant workshops. At the end of the day, like what underpins that is teamwork and team building and collaboration. When people go, yeah, how does lamp making or like, Turkish coffee making have anything to do with blockchain? It doesn't face value if you look at it like that. But when you see the room and how vibrant it is, take that energy and transplant that into a main stage where someone's giving a keynote, or transplant that into a panel talk. You have a much more vibrant experience. You also have people, and I think maybe we're more like extroverted or more extroverted, but there are people that are super, super introverted. How do you get them to come out of their shell, at least for the day that they're at Avalanche Summit? And so all these different kind of activations make up this crypto festival effectively. And that's basically the model. We picked Barcelona first 2 years, mainly because we were trying to validate the idea. We've more than validated that now, and we want to make sure that we can bring it to the world. And so that's where we were looking for other cities. Argentina was one of the top cities that we were looking at, or countries that we were looking at, especially Buenos Aires. Buenos Aires has an amazing dev community, generally speaking. But when you unpack that dev community, there's also a really, really vast blockchain community there. There's also a huge blockchain community all across Latin America and South America. And because we've been sufficiently servicing, I guess, or demand in Europe, especially Western Europe, and also Asia as well, with some of the smaller events like Avalanche houses and whatnot, we were saying, okay, Latin America, South America, we really haven't officially as a core team gone to market there physically. So let's actually go there. There's an amazing community in Colombia. I think it's in Medellin or Bogota. I think it might be both cities actually, but it was started from an external community member. Someone saying, hey, there's no one talked about Avalanche here. I want to bring something forth. That to me is so cool that Avalanche is now, and I think we've been in this place for a while, but Avalanche is now a place where you don't have to be part of Ava Labs. You don't have to be part of the Avalanche Foundation to do something. You can just simply be someone who is really passionate about this stuff and really wants to bring it to the community that they're a part of locally, and then start to shepherd a lot of the cultural components and the strengths of the platform that we have kind of amplified, and then they take that and amplify it even more. And I think that's really cool to see.
Yeah, very interesting. Since like Avalanche is like one of the like Argentina like focus conference this year, so that's quite unique about it. And that's interesting to hear that there's like a strong like dev community there. I didn't know that before.
Really strong dev community. And then honestly, to be honest, it is part of a risk, right? Like let's take a risk where no one else has gone, at least recently, as a major protocol. And then there's a lot of benefits to being kind of the first mover there. And so if we're able to kind of plant our roots there and say, hey, like we're willing to support you guys, this is exactly what's useful for your solutions, well, then I think we can actually compound that into better growth longer term.
I had like some discussion with some of the builders on Avalanche, and I was like Avalanche always throw good events and like always like pick the cities really good like footballers or like soccer players. Like, well, so you were like, is that how they base or choose the conference location? Like Barcelona and Argentina.
Honestly, yeah, maybe that's actually the real reason. Now, I didn't even think about that. Like, what's next? Like Brazil, I guess.
Maybe following the
Which was actually a contender, which was actually one of like we were considering Rio at one point.
oh my God, that's gonna be a thing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So moving to next question. So we discussed like community building, we discussed events and partnerships. So up next is KOL marketing and branding. So how does Avalanche like partners with different influencers and KOLs since like this marketing approach is becoming like more popular these days? So can you share some insights on that, please?
The way we like to steer the category of influencers or KOLs is not really to treat them like that, to be honest, or not to treat that category like that. Like I think, at least in my view, or in common kind of conversations, influencers imply you pay them to do something, they record it, they post it, they talk about it, and then you walk away. And there's not really like a long-term activation or a long-term relationship. A lot of these people of influence we've worked with, we focus on people that actually align with the product, right? Like it doesn't necessarily make sense to partner with like a huge celebrity that has nothing to do with Web3 because that is just a miss on the sell. Like they're going to have to be educated on what to say, but they're also going to not really believe in what they're saying. Like I think if you think about all the FTX celebrities, like they're getting a lot of backlash now. That's a perfect example. Most of them couldn't defend that and defend their position. They obviously got a check, which is totally cool, but at the end of the day, when things went south, they're not like, oh, I still don't regret what I did. Everyone regrets it, right? And so with Avalanche, it's like, who's actually the most relevant to blockchain generally? Traders, blockchain, Web3 traders or crypto traders. There are VCs, there are big operators, product people who have made a name for themselves in the space because they've created a product that is big, like, right? Like crypto, I think, unlike other, or actually similar to tech, actually, but you can have kind of these like micro celebrities, the inventor of HTML, the inventor of the Mosaic browser. We all know like all these kind of characters. Crypto is the same thing. The inventor of the ERC-20, the inventor of like the first Web3 wallet or hardware wallet. Like you kind of know these characters. And so let's leverage those people. Let's say, hey, like your problem statement is you want to use a chain that works. How about we try to show you what Avalanche is all about? And if that's not enough of a sell, then we can actually kind of go into proper or traditional influencer marketing where we say, hey, like we have this budget, we want to make this happen. And so at least the authenticity is there. So we always seek for authenticity. And that's what you're seeing mostly digitally, where you're seeing a lot of gamers talk about games, a lot of fund managers and want to talk about these funds. And a lot of these, most people are like, oh, Ava Labs or Avalanche must have you had a huge influencer budget. I would say the majority of them have nothing to do with budgets. They actually are saying this organically in the sense that we're not giving them funds, but not organically in the sense that we've actually made efforts to like talk to them and kind of in marketing, like bring them down the funnel, make the leads a little bit warmer, and like have them advocate for us because they want to, not because they have to.
I do see this like organic growth in terms of the Avalanche community and the authenticity of people, and especially these Avalanche Maxi that we discussed about. I definitely agree with like the authenticity and the organic growth of Avalanche
Yeah,
community.
and you're seeing, right? So it's not like you have to get like the biggest of the biggest all the time. You can also get, like people with like 5,000, just to quantify it, but like 5,000, 10,000 followers on Twitter. If you have 1,000 of those, that's easily impactful, reach your goals, but also even more impactful than maybe even just getting one person with the same amount of following. And we all know how algorithms work. They only take a percentage of your total reach anyways, or your total potential reach. And so to kind of use this micro influencer model, I think is a little bit more impactful. And I think it creates this feeling of, wow, everyone's talking about it. But that's just because like the echo chamber is just really loud. And I think that's what happens when crypto Twitter starts to like heat up. It's like, is everyone talking about this? No, no, not everyone's done it. Only like the 10,000 people that everyone is like aware of is talking about it. But one day I think it'll start to get bigger and bigger.
All right. And next is more on the future outlook. So looking ahead, what trends on the marketing side that you expect to kind of impact the blockchain and cryptocurrency industry, and how does Ava Labs prepare for the future?
I think generally the industry is going to continue to mature and hopefully identify the strong opportunities and the stuff that's short term, maybe like leave that to the wayside and not uh, deal with that as much as we have in the past cycles. That's what's kind of created these cycles and these bubbles, if you will, right? And so I think we're going to get smarter holistically as it happens in any other industry, the internet, mobile, the mobile era, that. I think the way we're trying to prepare ourselves is continue our focus, really focus on what our strengths are, not to get too distracted by all these new things. If the next cycle brings on a whole new different buzzword, let's really like keep ourselves disciplined to not necessarily build out teams to chase that. I'm happy to take risks to like try and capture that market, but if it's out of our reach, it's out of our reach, right? We have a lot of good things going for us. Let's keep tripling down on those things and we'll definitely pull ahead that way. And so I think that's really all it is. And then I think looking ahead, Ava Cloud as a service that I've been really close with, I've been working on for the last year or so. I think that's going to really start to pull away from the pack. There's not that many competitors right now. We're seeing a lot of enterprises come in, which is amazing. It obviously takes a long time to launch though, so we'll see how quickly they go market. But at the end of the day, super bullish on the enterprise deployments because I think what was said 2 cycles ago in like the ICO era where institutions and enterprises are coming, like I think that was a little too early in hindsight. But I think we're finally getting there.
Yeah, I think like this year, like the institutional narrative has been like really strong with like especially with the ETF approval, players like BlackRock jumping in, and a lot of the market these days are like quite driven by institutional players also. Yeah. All right,
Yeah.
coming to the end, which is the exclusive outfully. So can you share some insights on things that our audience should be keeping an eye out for in terms of like upcoming initiatives or developments from Avalanche and Ava Labs?
I think one that's really relevant to what we talked about a few topics ago is the summit with your background. Obviously, I think the date has been announced and the city, but super, super bullish on the. I think this is very similar, but very different to the last one. But I think it's one of the types of venues that most companies in our space haven't really tried to tackle.
Mhm.
I'm not saying this is like, it's not like the world's never seen this before. These venues have existed, and I think other industries have used them pretty actively, but not so much. And so I'm really, really excited. What I can say is it's a blank canvas, and so there's a lot of creative things our team, especially Jade's side on the production side, can do. Um, and so hopefully soon we'll be able to announce exactly where that is, and then also the subsequent experiences kind of surrounding it. We're gonna be taking a decent amount of risk on some of the new activations that really get people talking, get people out of their shells, get people really excited to be there. And so hopefully, of course, it's a different location, but it'll feel completely different from Barcelona 1, Barcelona 2, and it'll really be unique to the South American experience. So for anyone that's really considering like if they want to go or not. You can also not just take my word, watch all the videos, watch all the people tweeting about it when they happened. Super fun event. I think we're one of the best. And so you just got to see for yourself.
Would you describe it as like the Coachella of Web3?
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, like I love that. I love we aspire to get to that point. Yeah, like I think Coachella would look at us and be like, one day, but we think so.
I
So
think
yeah, that's kind of the vibe.
Yeah, last year was so close to like the Coachella of Web3, more like a music festival rather than like a normal crypto conference. Like,
Yeah.
it's definitely a compliment. All right. So today that wraps up the episode. So much insights and alpha from Jay. So stay tuned on different channels on AVAX and subscribe to the channel for more alpha leaks and insightful episodes. Thank you so much, Jay, for today, for your time. Really fun episode with you.
Yeah. No, thanks. Thanks for talking. Thanks for setting this up. This is really fun.
Yay.